The Viper V2 Pro is the most completely featured mouse I have ever used. Everything about it is executed to perfection. And the new GSR-SE offers a supremely balanced control surface, along with key improvements to their old line of pads. I got both these products on the day they were released and have made them consistently ever since. It is a combo that I have not been able to stop using. I have been trying to test other stuff out, but I keep coming back here, since I just have everything that I could reasonably want. It is too perfect. So today I want to break down what makes this combo tick and why it is so good for me, as well as explain my new philosophy around peripheral choice. Where I want to start here is with the god mouse itself, the Viper V2 Pro. This thing is incredible. For the first time, I think I have experienced a truly perfect product. There is just nothing that I could reasonably critique about it. Of course though, I should mention that some people have had issues here, namely with the buttons having excessive play, so they may not be the most consistent copy to copy. But mine here is sublime. The build quality is second to none. It feels completely solid in hand, which helps it to feel exceptionally premium. And all while seeming to be nearly hollow too with how lightweight it is. It is crazy impressive to get something this solid with this low density. Razer knows what they are doing. The clicks as well are truly next level and my personal favorite part about this mouse. They are Razer's same optical switches, so they do feel quite snappy. The actuation is very quick and latency is of course second to none, so they are crazy responsive. But these are tuned much better than their old opticals, so the tactical response is fantastic as well. It is very sharp and what I would describe as assertive feeling, but without being stiff. They are fairly heavy, but never actually difficult to press, so it just feels deliberate more than anything else, which I really enjoy. Pre and post travel is also minimized. Of course, there is still a little bit of it there, but this does actually help with the quick feel since it helps them be a little bit softer, which is actually very important for a switch that requires so much force. This tuning also carries over to the side buttons here. They are impressively crisp and tactile. This is how side buttons should be done. There's no mushiness or strange switches in sight, just pure perfection. So overall, these buttons definitely have become my personal favorite and have surpassed Vaxi, since no one else can really match how responsive these feel in game. They are just the best in class in every single way, and that alone is making it hard to go back to other mice. They feel that good. And speaking of responsiveness, the sensor implementation is also next level. It is genuinely better than wired. This may sound a little schizo, but there is 100% a difference. It is so crisp that it can actually be a little bit jarring to go to other mice, because it is just simply not as smooth. The X-Lite Mini, for example, is a mouse that I've been really enjoying, but it always takes a minute to get used to the sensor when I switch directly from the V2 Pro, because it is just simply not as smooth. And other wired options like Zowies have the same issue, they just aren't as good. Of course though, this difference is still quite marginal. All other gaming sensors are perfectly adequate. It's just that the Viper V2 Pro is a little bit better, but noticeably so, which is quite rare and worth mentioning, I feel. This is also why I'm quite excited for the 4K dongle, because my past experiences with high polling rate are fantastic. It just feels addictively good. So this higher performance with an already great sensor sounds unbeatable on paper. I can't wait to try it. Hopefully they get more restocks in soon, because it is impossible to buy one right now. They sell out in minutes. It's literally worse than Final Mouse. These feet as well are also shockingly good. Most of the time, stock feet are fairly mediocre, like they'll get the job done, but you'd probably be better off replacing them. But these are so good that I've never felt the need to do this, even as someone who has exclusively used aftermarket feet. They are that good. Although I should mention that they will tend to smooth out the texture on rough pads, so if you are an absolute texture freak, you may want to swap them out. But for me and everyone else I feel, these are just about as good as it gets. You'll have a great experience no matter what you use, whether it be smooth cloth pads, hybrids, or even hard surfaces, they all feel great. So this mouse is perfect stock too. You don't need to replace the feet like you would on a GPX, this mouse's closest competitor, which does actually make the steep price tag a little bit more palatable. I'm not going to get into the value discussion here because what you're willing to pay is completely personal, but for me, considering this mouse is perfect out of the box, and it's better than anything I've ever experienced before, $150 isn't entirely unreasonable. But again, make that judgment for yourself if whether a mouse is worth $150 for you personally, or in the words of our messiah himself, be a free-thinking lion. If I had to criticize any part about this mouse, I would probably go to the finish and scroll wheel. This mouse's finish is raw, uncoated plastic with a bit of a PBT feel to it. Normally, this is awful for me since I have very sweaty hands. They just get way too slippery to get a proper grip. This is the major issue I had with the Fanatic Bolt. This mouse is an absolute banger in every regard, but the coating makes it nearly unusable. These raw plastic finishes aren't that bad. But the Viper actually hasn't given me any issues here, since it is a little bit more chalky than is usual for these finishes, so while sweat still definitely compromises your grip, it doesn't exactly get slippery. Of course, it isn't quite glued into my hand either, but I don't get any unwanted finger movement, so it's good enough. And I can still pick up the mouse properly, which I can't say about the Fnatic Bolt. Of course, rubberized coatings are still going to be better for sweaty hands, so Zowie and Logitech mice do definitely create a better grip. And they just feel more premium than this raw plastic, which is always what you want from a flagship. So I would definitely prefer if Razer developed a similar coating here. But I still have never had any problems gripping the mouse, so it's a non-issue really. It just could be a little better. Likewise, the scroll wheel is good enough, but could be better. The steps are defined and the wheel is fairly smooth, so it's a good balance of tactility. But there's something weird happening in the wheel itself. It almost feels like there's something scratching within the mechanism, so it's not the most consistent or clean during long scrolls like you would do during browsing. But just like the coating, this doesn't actually impact the experience, and in-game I don't notice it at all. It is perfectly adequate, just could be a little more refined. So all in all, the Viper V2 Pro is a phenomenally executed mouse. Again, there does appear to be some inconsistencies copy to copy, especially on the clicks, so make sure you shop somewhere with a good return policy, but on a copy as good as mine, this mouse is second to none. It just doesn't miss in any meaningful way. It's the most complete and most well-executed feature set available on the market, which is the reason why this mouse is my current main. Normally, the little stuff like this isn't that important for me. What I usually look for in a potential main is a killer shape first and foremost to optimize my ability to control the mouse. Then I highly value good build quality to ensure long-term reliability. The Viper does absolutely deliver on the quality front. Again, this mouse feels great, but the shape is quite mediocre. I was actually high on it at first, if you remember my initial impressions, but it has only felt worse and worse with time as I learned how suboptimal it really is for my grip style. Normally, this would make the mouse unmainable. Shape used to be that important to me, but my philosophy on mouse choice has changed pretty significantly lately. Now I am no longer an advocate of the shape is king mantra. It is still definitely an important thing to consider, I feel, because mice that are too large or too small may cause issues for you, like joint discomfort, which should be avoided at all costs. But the Viper has proven to me that a shape really only needs to be good enough. As long as it doesn't give you major issues, you can adapt and still play at your best, even when faced with mediocrity. For example, the back region of the Viper's shape is perfectly mediocre, but I adjusted. As you can see here, there really isn't a hump to speak of like you find on so many other mice. It is actually surprisingly tall in the back here, so when you claw it, it does make a decent amount of contact all the way up into your palm, which does give some stability, but it is so wide that it is difficult to tuck it into this middle pocket of your palm, unless of course you are just completely palming it. This is due to these flares here impacting your hand a little bit too soon and stopping you from pulling it deep in, much like you would with a thinner backed but similarly flat mouse like the classic Zowie FK2. There is a world of a difference here on how tucked you can get. The FK2 just creates so much more contact in this middle palm area. This does make the Viper pretty poor for my normal claw grip, since this full middle palm contact is key for giving me stability. But I was actually able to change things up and adapt to the shape. Now I use an even more relaxed grip than usual, where my fingers are almost completely extended. Instead of pulling the mouse back into my hand, I push the mouse into the side of my palm here with my thumb, both the tip and the meaty part, which actually does a great job of leveraging this wide back to create stability, also at this triangle here, in the absence of palm contact, by using this light amount of pressure. It is still of course not as stable as a big hump, but it is pretty good for what you're working with actually. I should mention here that I'm not actually fully pinching the back like I would with the G33SE. Instead, I am just gently applying side pressure, which actually mostly comes from my hand naturally collapsing down over the mouse, as opposed to actively squeezing it. This style doesn't add any tension at all through my hand and wrist, and it actually feels highly comfortable, since all we have to do is just plop my hand down to grip. Nothing requires any active effort. It's really nice actually. This I think should be a good metric of your mouse grip too. If you can just pick your mouse up without tensing at all, just setting it down over and picking it up naturally, if this works and this is your normal mouse grip, I think you're in a pretty good spot. Because I have personally certainly found these more relaxed grips to be better, so you should try this. It might work out for you. Also, this is why the Viper is able to beat out the G33SE for me currently. This mouse is still my ideal shape. It is very comfortable and great for control since it just fits my hand like a glove, but I have to use this more aggressive grip, which I have found to be just inherently less consistent since I have to constantly manage the amount of tension I'm applying rather than just the pure relaxation that the Viper offers. The G33 just ends up introducing more variables, which throws me off sometimes. Of course though, it is still an insane mouse for me. Again, it's the perfect shape. It's just that my grip style has changed up a little bit, so it's not as optimal anymore. Now, back to the Viper. Since I don't have as much support here in the back, I end up using my fingers a lot more to aim. Normally, I use my wrists and fingers pretty equally, but I can definitely feel the lack of support here stressing my fingers out more. But this is actually not an issue since the front of this mouse is pretty low, which I feel helps get your fingertips in plane with the pad and the sensor. I feel personally that this helps a lot with small movement precision, since it does help to keep everything more compact. And there are these nice comfort grooves in the buttons which lock your fingers in. This helps it to feel more responsive now that you never slide around and your fingers stay thoroughly in place. So even though this mouse does force me to use my fingers more, the shape does a great job of facilitating the style, and I was able to adjust to this with time, which is the most important part here. Even if a mouse shape is non-optimal, you can learn how to perform your best with it, as long as you give it enough time. That is what is key. What I have found recently is that the best shapes for aim only offer their benefits in the short term. A mouse like the Z13C, for example, does certainly help my mechanics to feel better. A mouse like the Z13C definitely does help my mechanics to feel better. This thinner and even lower front further amplifies this finger aim, so it's able to do what the Viper does well, but even better. And in addition, I have this high hump here to lock into my palm, which gives me the support that I sorely miss on the Viper. So it'll immediately feel better for aim. My mechanics are sharper and I will hit new Kovac scores immediately. Yet, my actual in-game performance has never felt better than it has with the Viper, because this is the mouse I have used for months on end almost exclusively. Which is actually something that I cannot do with the Z13C, since there are just too many things missing with it. Like it still has a cable, it weighs a little bit more, and the clicks are a little bit worse. Now, none of these issues are in and of themselves deal breakers, but they all help to pull me away from the mouse a little bit to try to seek greener pastures. So I'll eventually end up switching off of it to try to scratch that itch. But with the Viper, there is nothing greener. I don't feel that same compulsion to try something, since this is the mouse that truly has everything, which is what allows me to use it as my main for months like it have. And of course put in the time to learn how to use it as well as anything else, even a mouse that I may aim better with in the short term like the Z13C. So now I feel that the most important part about choosing a mouse is going for something that you are confident that you can use long term. Nothing else is nearly as important, I feel. Long-term viability should be your only concern. Not which gives you better Kovac scores, not which shape you feel offers the finest control. Just focus on finding what you can consistently grind with for a long period, what makes you not want to use any other mouse. And if you're like me and what keeps you switching mice are all the small things, then the Viper V2 Pro should be your only consideration. Its shape should be easy enough to adapt to, it is very simple, it doesn't really have anything aggressive going on, and it has the most complete feature set to date. It is truly a no-brainer. This mouse gets my highest recommendation for anyone. Now onto the other half of my god setup, the Zowie GSR-SE Rouge. This pad is so sick, and just like the Viper, is a case of a product I can use exclusively for a long time. Quality-wise, this is a definite step up for Zowie. It still uses the same SR base with no stitching, so there aren't any huge innovations here. But this isn't actually much of an issue for me personally. These SR bases have always stuck quite well to my desk. It doesn't move around during normal use and feels quite stable. I still get a little bit of drift, so it is not the best, but again, no problems here. They also lay quite flat for me. This will be an issue for some, and at first it is bowed, like straight out of the box, but after a week or two, it's totally fine and lays almost completely flat. Also, this non-stitched edge feels pretty good, honestly. This is the pad that I have used by far the most for the past few months, and I have still had no issues with the fraying whatsoever, so it seems quite durable, actually better than the X10 Control, strangely enough. Where they did innovate though is with the humidity resistance. Here are the massive improvements. Gone are the days of your GSR sponging up the slightest bit of moisture in the air. Now it is so much more consistent. Coincidentally, for the past couple months, it's been the hottest and wettest part of the year where I live. I'm talking 90+ degree days and frequent rain. But this pad has felt incredibly consistent. The surface's performance does not vary significantly. It will actually start to stick to your arm a little, especially once it gets hotter, since the cloth does tend to trap heat. So it is not as perfect as most hybrid pads are, but this is great for a cloth pad and honestly much better than I was expecting. To get this great humidity resistance, they changed up the weave a little bit to be tighter. In addition to repelling moisture better, this weave also performs excellently. This is easily one of the smoothest non-coated cloth pads out there, due to this very tight weave feeling quite slick to the touch and on your mouse feet. The slickness also gives the pad a surprising amount of speed. It is still not a fast pad by any means. I'd still rate it in the category of balanced control pads, right along with the Artisan Zero for reference. Although it may be a little bit faster than that pad. Like if the Zero was a 4 out of 10 for speed, this could be like a 4.5, maybe a 5 out of 10, so keep that in mind. But the slickness does definitely give it a glide that is reminiscent of a faster pad, since it does really allow your mouse to have that satisfying smooth glide, despite its good amount of dynamic friction that slows it down. and of course helps it to feel quite controlled. It'll give it a great amount of braking force, again, especially for its glide speed. It still doesn't offer you a crazy amount of braking force though, so that is something you have to keep in mind. Something like a slow control pad like a QCK or VAXI PA Black, or even a more textured balanced pad like the old Zeros or Excellent Control will definitely give you more braking force. But the Rouge here still definitely has enough of it to offer a noticeable amount and help you with slowing your mouse down, which again allows it to feel controlled. And not like your pad is just hanging you out to dry, it definitely helps you along. This controlled feel is also amplified by a moderate amount of static friction. Again, this friction is moderate. It's not going to feel like a mud pad. It is not going to slow you down significantly, either when changing directions when tracking or when making small corrections to your crosshair. Instead, it feels like it just gives you a touch security, like a gentle hand keeping your mouse steady that slowly eases up as you move your mouse. Again, not muddy at all. This slightly muddy feel is what turned me off of the VAXI PA. If you remember in my review, I didn't like that in fast-paced games it felt a little bit too restrictive for tracking. But the Rouge is just slightly faster than this with a little bit less static and dynamic friction due to being smoother, which does actually allow the Rouge to keep what I enjoy about the PA, that is its sense of stability combined with a controlled yet unrestricted glide, but without any of the sluggishness that this pad has. So it is a true upgrade of a pad that I already enjoy. Personally, I feel that this amount of static friction is ideal for performance. Your own preferences are key, of course, but in my experience, static friction makes you so much more consistent because, again, it's like a helping hand. It just does so well to clean up your aim a little bit, reducing jitters and refining your crosshair placement, whereas a faster pad is going to expose you far more, since the force you apply affects your mouse more, amplifying your mistakes. Of course though, the trade-off here is that faster pads also amplify what you do well. Your flicks and corrections will be faster, reducing your time to kill, and the lack of the slight restriction can actually encourage better habits, where you focus on manually correcting your aim rather than crushing on a pad's stopping power, which I do notice happening with more slow control pads. This is why a pad like the ZeraPad Kin is the best for aim for me right now. It has very low static friction, so it is completely unrestrictive, just total freedom for small motions. And the glide has just a touch of friction as well to help it feel controlled, yet still so snappy and responsive, a truly best of both worlds type of situation. Just like the Z13C, this pad is an aim trainer demon. It helps me to feel so sharp, and this combo in particular is just godly. But in game, and especially for anything slow paced, the speed category is just too inconsistent inherently. The peaks are amazing of course, and feel great to hit, but the variability of low friction is just too much for me. That is why, before the GSR-SE, I actually preferred the VAXI PA Black in game. Its quite high friction that puts it just at the edge of muddy felt insanely consistent once I got used to it. My peaks are of course a far cry from even balanced control pads, but it is such a reliable performer that has been my best in game. However, it's so slow that some days it just feels clunky, and I can't for the life of me find a rhythm with it, so I have to switch off of it a little bit until I start to feel more confident. So, just like with mice, pads have the same issues of small things pulling me off them eventually, whether that be a lack of consistency or too high friction, which is where the GSR-SE comes in, just like the Viper, because it is able to achieve a superior feeling of balance. Its slick glide is reminiscent of faster pads, where it's able to get out of your way for large swipes, but it still has enough dynamic friction to retain braking force, which keeps it feeling controlled, and its moderate static friction helps with stability, but without being so much that it'll impede you, just like I feel with the PA Black on some days. It's also super consistent, so I don't have to worry about it feeling different day to day. Then, of course, it just looks amazing and feels great to the touch. So it has everything that I could reasonably want, which has allowed me to use it for months on end without wanting anything else, just like the Viper, so I get that same benefit of consistency. Maybe though I would prefer texture pads with a similar speed profile, since those are always so satisfying to use. But I have been a big fan of smoothness lately, especially when it is as well executed as it is here, so I'm not even really missing anything. It is just a perfectly rounded pad. It doesn't really excel anywhere like the ZeraPad or PA Black do, but it is so versatile that I can use it for months, which is what's going to be important when it comes to picking peripherals. So overall, the Viper V2 Pro and Zowie GSR-SE Rouge is the perfect combo for me. The Viper is the first truly flawless and fully featured product, so if you are someone who swaps a lot because of the small stuff, like I do, this is an excellent option. And the GSR-SE Rouge is the perfect balance of everything that I want in a pad, so if you like balanced control pads like I do, this is a great take on the formula. Still though, I wouldn't quite call this combo endgame for me personally, since I have of course learned that you can get used to anything, so something else could come in. And there are other products I am currently testing which are super promising. The Vaxi XE feels great so far. It is insanely comfortable. The shape is so well designed. I could just gently cradle it in my hand. It is so good. And of course, Vaxi mice are premium. The clicks, coating, scroll, build quality, all perfect. So it is yet another banger, and actually Vaxi's best yet. So we'll have to see if comfort and quality can overcome this cable and the higher weight. Then the DeathAdder V3 just released, and it's great. Just as good as the Viper in every way. Another perfect mouse, which makes it an amazing candidate for a new main, because everything I liked about the Viper is here too. So we'll have to see in the end which shape I prefer, and if I'll be able to main an Ergo over the Ambies that I do usually prefer. And finally, the Temple of Dreams from Padsmith here is actually really sick. It performs insanely well. It is another balance control pad, which are kind of a dime a dozen at this point, but its surface is super unique and seems to be something really special. It's also very high quality. Padsmith know how to do it. So we'll have to see how this does long term, and if this lower static friction surface can work as well for me as a GSR-SE Rouge long term. I'm not sure that any of these other options will unseat this combo for me personally, just because of how much time I put in on this one setup, but I am game to start experimenting again after staying so consistent the past couple months. I'll be sure to let you know what my mains turn out to be after testing. Alright, thank you for watching. See you in the next one.